It was Friday, November 3, 2023, around 7:15 p.m. The streets of New York were wet from a light drizzle, and the glow of shop windows reflected on the sidewalks. People hurried past, umbrellas bumping together, the sound of tires splashing through puddles filling the air. On the corner sat a man in a worn coat, his shoes scuffed, hands tucked inside his pockets. He looked tired, cold, and invisible to most, but tonight, something would happen that made everyone stop and stare. A woman approached him, holding cash in her hand. "Here, this can help," she said gently. He looked at her, then at the money, and shook his head. People nearby stopped for a moment, whispering. "Why would anyone turn it down?" one asked. He didn't speak. He didn't take a step. His eyes seemed to hold a secret, one that no one on the street would guess, and one that would soon leave anyone who heard it in tears. James had been living on the streets for nearly 3 years, not because he wanted to, but because life had left him with little choice. Evicted after a medical emergency drained his savings, he survived on small jobs, returned change, and coins he carefully set aside. Despite his circumstances, he carried himself with quiet dignity. His worn dark gray coat, faded jeans, and scuffed shoes didn't hide the care he took in keeping his hands clean and his notebook tucked safely in his pocket. Every evening around 6:50 p.m., James would sit on the corner of Fifth Avenue and Main Street, observing the city pass by. He was cautious, polite, and reserved, always nodding to those who acknowledged him. His eyes were sharp, reflective, alive with a quiet purpose, a purpose the strangers passing him by could not yet see. James had a promise. It wasn't written in his notebook, but it guided every choice he made. The coins he earned and saved were meant for a child in a hospital, someone who relied on him to follow through. This promise shaped his life and kept him from taking free money offered by strangers. The rain was light, the streets wet, and a young woman approached, holding out a handful of bills. "Here, this might help," she said softly, smiling. James looked at her, then at the money, and shook his head. He couldn't take it. This offer wasn't part of the plan he had so carefully constructed for the child. People passing by slowed, some whispering, some frowning. "Why would anyone turn it down?" one muttered. James's eyes followed a child running past with a balloon, laughing. He almost smiled but thought of the hospital, of the promise, and the small pile of coins he had saved with careful effort. Another stranger lingered, offering a cup of coffee. "It's free. Surely it can't hurt," they said. James shook his head again. "I can't," he murmured. Each refusal was quiet, calm, but firm. His dignity was not pride, it was a commitment to something greater than himself. James reached into his coat pocket and carefully pulled out the small envelope he had been saving for weeks. Inside were coins and a folded note for a young boy in a nearby hospital. The boy's family couldn't afford treatment, and James had promised he would do what he could to help. The young woman stepped closer, curiosity and concern on her face. Why not take the money?" she asked gently. James's voice was steady, almost reverent. "This is for him," he said, tapping the envelope. "I can't use anything else. If I do, I can't keep my promise." The passers-by who had been observing began to understand. One woman's eyes welled up. A man whispered to his companion about the depth of James's dedication. The rain eased, leaving the street shimmering under the lights. James handed the envelope to a nurse who had come to collect it. "For him," he said, nodding once. For a moment, the city paused. Strangers who had passed by without a thought now felt something stir inside them. The quiet integrity and selflessness of a man who refused help so that someone else could have hope. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the streetlights. James watched the nurse carefully tuck the envelope into her bag, nodding with gratitude. The coins he had saved, every bit earned or set aside with care, were now in the right hands, for the child who needed them most. People who had paused earlier began to linger quietly. Some offered soft smiles, a few whispered words of encouragement. One woman placed a cup of coffee beside him. "You're doing something amazing," she said. James only nodded, a small, quiet smile forming on his lips. He didn't need recognition, the knowledge that the boy would receive help was enough. For the first time in weeks, James felt a warmth he hadn't felt on the streets. Not from money, not from strangers' generosity, but from the sense of purpose fulfilled. Each act of selflessness he had held onto rippled outward, leaving the strangers around him touched and thoughtful. Sometimes, the greatest gifts aren't measured by what you receive, but by what you choose to give, even when it costs everything. James walked slowly down the wet street, the city moving around him. The reflections of the streetlights shimmered on puddles, mirroring the quiet strength and integrity of a man who had refused immediate comfort for something far more important. His choices had spoken louder than any words, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed them. If this story moved you, share it to inspire someone today. Subscribe to the Empathy Room for more true stories of courage, kindness, and integrity.